Welcome to the world of Rex. It is Marvel Rex here. I am so excited to be bringing you a bonus episode for the pod with a special guest, Jacob Tobia. So Jacob's going to join us in a moment. I'm so excited to talk about Jacob and their new book. They have a book that they're working on that deeply ties in with the topic at hand today. We will be talking about Chiron and the North Node meeting in Aries. And for those of you who are like, I don't know what that means, gobbledy bobbly book, we will unpack all of this. And then it will be a lovely segue into the work that Jacob does out in the world and what Jacob is currently working on with their book. All right, so strap in. It's going to be really fun. This is an important episode. It's an important bonus episode because this energy has been active really since the start of the year, particularly late February, March, April of this year, but it also tones the entire year of 2024. I would say safely until Pisces season of 2025. So you want to think now that you're listening all the way until about February, March of 2025. What I will be talking about today and what we will be diving into in a more dimensional way with Jacob is very active and tones the entire year. And so it's important work for us to be paying attention to. It is work that we are doing by ourselves and work we are also doing in partnership because this is happening on the Aries and Libra axis, which is Aries, the self, Libra, the contracts with other people, one-on-one, other people, whether that's romance, business, parent-child, all the things, our closest relationships, not necessarily most intimate, but the people we do have to interface with in an oppositional way, you versus me. So this is all coming up. All right. Just for some helpful dates for everybody before we dive in, this energy was very active on the 9th of February. So you might want to think back to what was going on. That was the true North Node Chiron, true node conjunction to Chiron. And that's the actual mathematical location of that North Node. And then on March 5th, the mean node had an exact hit. And the mean node is more of it takes into account the sort of inconsistencies of the nodal axis. It's sort of an average, but astrologers count the mean node and true node usually to be, fair. It's fair. We'll say it's a fair part of real estate. Like all of February, March, even April is so potent with this chironic North Node energy. So just think back February 9th, what was going on, March 5th, what was going on, particularly in the themes that we're about to dive into. Okay. So what is Aries? Let's start with Aries because this energy is happening in Aries. Aries often rules Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars is a planet he's the god of war. He is male, so he is associated with divine masculinity slash even the shadow of masculinity. I talked in many, many episodes ago about Bell Hooks's book, The Will to Change, and it's about healing masculinity. It's a wonderful book. It's very much Chiron and Aries. So if you need a book recommendation, The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, as well as the book that Jacob's going to release, although not necessarily right now, but we'll stay tuned for Jacob's book, where we are unpacking masculinity. That's a big piece of work we're doing this year as individuals, and then these are collective transits, aka we are seeing this on the world stage. It does not matter how you identify. I want to be very clear here. It does not matter whether you're like, I'm not a man. I don't care. Because first off, Aries exists in all of our charts. And secondly, to move it out of astrology, we all have imbibed late capitalism, patriarchy, internalized sexism, internalized homophobia. All of these things are living inside of us, and we have to contend with them. And this transit is asking us to go very deep and be brave. So that word, brave, with this journey into unpacking toxic masculinity within each and every one of us, within our culture, within our governments. Yeah, all the many ways. Okay. So maleness, masculinity, how that has been conceived, what are the social codes that we all sort of are like, yeah, that's what makes a man. We're going to be really unpacking this. Aries also rules the heads of state. So there's a leadership component here. Aries is the first sign. It's like, look at me, I am. So also a sign ruled by Mars, the god of war, not a sign that's afraid of conflict. So there's definitely conflict built into this process. There's tension. The love language of Mars is friction. All right. I always joke with my heavy Aries clients. I'm like, look, your love language is slightly conflictual. It's slightly combative. And it can be slightly or very combative, depending on what they've got going on there. So that's the archetype of Aries, very highly yang energy sign. It's a fire sign. It wants to move forward. It can definitely bulldoze or burn things down to get it out of its way. Chiron being there and the North Node being there in an unprecedented way. The last time we had this, I believe, was in the 55 years ago in 1969. We had this energy. So if you were born around then, wow, this is a really big reckoning moment for anyone born in the late 60s, early 70s. You're doing some major healing around your identity right now and slash toxic masculinity. Um, and so, regardless, this is a very unprecedented moment. It doesn't happen very often. Last time it was 55 years ago. So, we want to be really paying attention to how we are navigating our own. There's a few layers, our own masculinity. Underneath that, and Bell Hooks goes into this, we really need to be looking at our relationship to our core identity wounds. I'm going to go deeper into this over the next couple weeks. I think that I'm not exactly sure when this episode's coming out, but I will be talking about core identity wounds for the next couple episodes because it's so important. Okay. So Chiron in the North Node. Chiron is the wound in the chart. Okay, so everyone has Chiron in their birth chart. Chiron exists. He is a minor planet. He's an asteroid. I like to call him a minor planetary body. That's my lovely, friendly term for Chiron. Chiron definitely holds importance, even though he's not a major planet. Okay, he holds a lot of importance because he's basically the Achilles heel in someone's chart. He also transits in the sky above. So right now he's in Aries. He's been there since 2018. We'll talk about the timeline of that in a second. So when Chiron, this Achilles heel, this wound, this unintegrated shadow is in the sign of Aries, we have to be looking at all this masculinity stuff. We have to be looking at heads of state. We have to be looking at how we actually engage in conflict. Now, there's a very interesting thing that happens in society where we've got a ton of violence on TV and we have a ton of violence in our social media, right? And yet, most people are conflict avoidant. So there's this really weird, I want to say, paradox that happens in life where we have, at least right now in late capitalism, we have this really strained paradox where we're volleying between Libra and Aries. Aries is this conflict oriented sign. There's a lot of violence packed into the shadow of Aries. And then the opposite sign of Libra is conflict avoidance, being completely afraid to have any kind of real conflictual situation with somebody. So, this is really interesting that that's present with most of us, and we're going to be faced with Chiron being very present right now. We're going to be faced with this moment of reckoning around whether, like, what our relationship to conflict is and whether we even have a relationship to conflict. Are we kind of on autopilot there? That's also going to get pulled up majorly during this time. So we're healing both the Aries and Libra parts of our chart right now. If you know where those are, it's very helpful. And if you don't, you can get a reading with me. Regardless, Chiron is an Achilles heel, aka it's the part of a person that if you touch, it really hurts. So even if it's just a gentle touch, ooh, ow, that hurts. And I mean this more on a psychic level, but it also can literally manifest somatically. This happens a lot with clients where they're having a physical pain in relationship to their Chiron. So Chiron can be a health aspect, but it is mostly a psychic health aspect where, oh, that's where I feel the most vulnerable. I don't want people to see that part of me. It's an unintegrated part of the self. And guess what? Chiron is actually the key. He's shaped like a key. You can look at his glyph. You can type in Chiron glyph. Chiron, shaped like a key, is actually the key to your most potent and powerful self. So the thing that you are the most vulnerable and triggery around is actually the point in your chart where you are being asked to step into leadership. So instead of being Chiron is known as the wounded healer, instead of the wounded healer, it's the wounded leader, right? That's what the journey is in this embodiment. It doesn't mean that you're figuring out this out all in April, right? It's more, oh, I'm figuring this out this year, or I'm paying more attention to where I'm being asked to step up into leadership around a core wound of mine. So I'm going to give an example from myself here to just texture this. I have Chiron in my first house in Leo. So Leo is about being seen. It's about the performer and the artist. I am literally an artist. That's what I do. I am very convinced that I'm actually propelled by my Chiron. It's extremely activated in my chart. So whether I want to be or not, I have to be on stage. That's Leo. It scares the living bejesus out of me. Less so now because I've done a lot of healing work. But when I first, especially when I was a teenager, I did not want to be seen because I was genderqueer, which is a word that we no longer use, but I feel like an old man. Um, I was genderqueer. I was not able to fit into a legible category. It's my first house of self. It's the first house of how people receive me. People could not put me into a category, right? They were like, whoa, you've had that jawline your whole life. And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to be a girl. So, like, really complicated, right? And my wound, although it was in the first house where I felt like I wanted to disappear, I didn't want to be seen because I didn't want to be hurt. Now I'm literally putting myself on stage. That's the work with Chiron and Leo and Chiron in the first house, which is Chiron and Aries, by the way. They're synonymous. Chiron first house, Chiron Aries, pretty much the same thing. We are being asked to come out of the closet of our deepest wounds right now and to transform them. So that's what I did. I was like, I'm going to do the thing that scares me the most. And the thing that scares me the most is being on stage, particularly doing stand-up comedy where I'm really being myself. That's not just a character I'm playing. I'm talking from my own experience. Now, that's what is on the docket for everybody. Chiron and Leo is its own thing. That's my Chiron placement. Anyone born in the early 90s will likely have Chiron and Leo. You need to check the year for sure. But again, if you want to go deeper around your own core wound, this is a great time to do it. So book a reading. Like I will go deep with you in the Chiron way. We will go there and I will give you practical tips and tricks on how to navigate this energy. Overall, Chiron and Aries, the play out how it rolled down through history was that when it moved in 2018 it corresponded with the Me Too movement. So we saw all these men, right? Here we are, Aries. We saw all these men doing these violent things towards women, and women came out and said, we have to this has to transform. That's Chiron. Chiron's like, we have to transform the wound. We have to transform this thing that's very shadowy that no one wants to integrate. Okay. So it completely like Chiron and Harvey Weinstein, boom, 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 like all of it. And that was the Me Too movement. So that exploded into the collective consciousness. Everyone was like, we have to really look at what's going on with men, question mark, like what are they doing? And men in positions of power, heads of state. Harvey Weinstein was definitely head of state in Hollywood. That's a way to look at that. He wielded an ungodly amount of power and he used it for very nefarious behavior and frankly disgusting behavior. So Chiron will reveal through a very big wound point, and the wound point can be hard to look at and hard to metabolize. These next couple months, each and every one of us will have to look personally in our lives as to something that is really wounded. My advice for you on a very practical note is face the parts of your identity that feel effing hard right now. Just do it. Just do it. That's so Aries. Just do it. You can do it all year. I'm not saying that you have to really like, especially April's got a lot of very hairy astrology. Like the astrology is very intense, aka the weather above is very intense. We're gonna have some hail. We're gonna have some windstorms, you know. So maybe not April, but it will be very obvious in April. And then we can start to make little small adjustments throughout the year, dedicate time to healing with Saturn and Pisces, healing where the core wounds are showing up. What does it look like if you go down that pathway, right? You can also work with me one on one over the year. I work with a few clients every other month, sometimes every month, in terms of how to go deeper into their own personal healing and where they can actually become intimate with a major trigger point. Like that's the medicine of this moment is we're being asked to do deep shadow work around our own internalized um, patriarchal notions, capitalism, the way capitalism has turned and transfigured all of us to be very competitive and very uh, winner takes all. That's all being destroyed with Pluto in Aquarius. So we're all being asked to let it go. Let it go. Or slash transform those things inside of us and become a lot more what does the healed masculinity look like? What does it look like to be a provider, to be a daddy in the true sense of the term, regardless of how you identify? So still being in a position of leadership, but also not being violent in that leadership. And leadership can look like, it doesn't have to be, if you're listening and you're like, I'm not a leader in my job, like you are a leader in some aspect of your life. It could be at home with your family. It could be in your partnership, you're being asked to step up as a leader. Like that's a really big part of the Libra archetype when I'm working with clients. A lot of clients are like, oh, I have been autopilot in my relationships and I need to step up as a leader, which is really scary. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly Chiron and the North Node in Aries. Doing something brave to heal a core wound, to step up into leadership. If you spend some time here, right? If you spend some time after this, after listening to this podcast, sitting and thinking, where am I being asked to show up in leadership? Your soul already knows the answer. I'm guaranteed that if you just sit with it for a minute, you'll be like, oh yeah, I got to do that. I got to do that thing. It's scary. I don't have all the pieces put together. The beauty of the Aries archetype, truly the sacred beauty of the Aries archetype, is not necessarily having the answers, but going forward anyway through the jungle, right? Through the wilderness. I love this about Aries. Okay. So that's not violent. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to be a leader in my relationship, or I don't know how I'm going to be a leader in this new business venture, but I am going to move forward step by step and I'm going to figure it out. And I'm also going to ask for help, right? So that's a big part of this journey. The phrase that is associated with Chiron and Aries is I am healing the I am. I am healing the I am. And I am, and I wrote blank, like what are these new I ams that are coming in for you? Can you get clear enough during this period of time to look at the I am and become a leader? Leading into 2025, there's big, big, big changes, particularly in 2026, but 2025, 2026, we just have huge changes where we're being asked to really become a lot more integrated as personal individuals, as individuals rather, so that we can be part of a collective, so that we can actually work in lateral organizations. Okay. So the North Node being there is just amplifying this energy and sucking it up so that it's in our consciousness, like literally sucking toxins up into our consciousness. So it's like, oh, I need to deal with that part of my core wound. Okay. And I talk about this in another episode. I'll keep it brief today because we're going to talk to Jacob. And that's like so interesting and so exciting. Okay. So one book that came up is that's related, in my opinion, to healing our leadership is a book by Eric Potterat and Alan Eagle, which is called Learned Excellence. Learned Excellence. And they've done a ton of research, I think decades of research with world-class performers in many fields. So not just world-class athletes, but like CEOs, all these people who are in high positions of performance and leadership. And they basically learned through all this studying that you can learn, it's not that some people are more talented than others. Yes, people have talents. Everyone has core gifts, which are usually hidden in their core wound, aka their Chiron, but you can learn leadership. It's not like, oh, well, I'm not a leader, I'm really shy. You can actually learn it. This is what they found out. They found that the world's best performers tend to focus on their identity and not worry about their reputation. Very interesting. Here we are, North Node in Aries, focusing on identity. What is reputation? Reputation's Libra. Reputation's Libra. So South Node is a draining energy. It's like drain your value placement on reputation. They say these performers often have a values credo. So it's 10 markers, not all of them have 10, but 5 to 10 markers that define their identity and their identity's values. What brings them energy and joy, and how do they like to live their life on a daily basis? Okay. I was writing these down recently doing this homework because this is the homework right now for the year. And I was like, oh, I like to be punctual. I like to be on time. And that was like a new discovery for me. I know that, but like writing it down, you're like, oh, wow. And that's a form of leadership. When you tell someone you're going to be someone on time, be somewhere on time, you be there on time. You're there on time, right? And so that's one of my values credo. Uh, that does not mean that so the idea of reputation is, oh, someone's like, oh, he's always 5 minutes early. Ugh. Or like, oh, he's always right on time. Ugh. And what if I placed more emphasis on that and was like, oh no, maybe I need to be 5 minutes late to everything, right? I'm being destabilized. My identity, I'm not placing my identity formation over the reputation, right? So you want to be really careful. That's what's happening in the sky right now with this Aries Libra opposition and the nodes being there on top of Chiron. When you rely on identity and its corresponding values, so really getting clear about your values, reputation takes care of itself. So you let go. It's like literally South Node in Libra. Let go of what other people think of you. The only way you can do that consistently is if you're very much like dedicating yourself to what your values credo is, checking in on it, rereading the list, coming back home to yourself every day. There's also, of course, spiritual infrastructure as part of this. All right. They basically, and I actually added this here, that violence is contained. So violence is part of life. Like things happen. We all mess up. We hurt other people. We don't always mean to do it. Sometimes we do. But like violence will happen, but it is very much contained by staying true to strong values of self. So it's harder to be violent in life, especially if you're being conscious, especially if you're like applying consciousness to what you do on a daily basis and have a values credo. It's a lot harder to be a total, asshole, basically. Yeah, not that easy if you're like, oh, these are this is my value system, and I'm basing my identity off this, and I base my decisions based on my value system. Anyone can do this, is what I want to say. All right. So it starts with clearly understanding your identity. Who are you? What do you care about and stand for? And it seems like an easy question. You're like, Marvel, I have thought about this. I'm 35, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But have you actually taken the time to just really sit with it right now in the potency of this energy? This energy is so potent. And like I said, it hasn't happened for 55 years. Like a lot of us haven't experienced this before. So take some time during this, April, even May period, anytime in the year to go deeper into creating a values credo. What brings you joy? What identity markers define you? What are your core characteristics and attributes? What do you find, what do you most respect in yourself and others? You can find about 10 things. I actually landed right around six. And then you can, if you want to go real deep with it, commit it to your memory and refer to it when you have to make an important decision, especially in a moment of interrelational Libra conflict. Okay. So when you're referring back to your values credo, you stay true to your identity. And then again, the reputation will take care of itself. Let it go. Right. I want to read this quote. When we center our performance of life in who we are and worry less about what others think of us, our performance tends to improve. Alongside it, so does our reputation. You can't find a better win-win scenario. So I wanted to bring that into the fore for us to think about in terms of how we are living our lives. The Saturn and Pisces medicine, in terms of building the values credo, it has to come from a place of unconditional love of self and others, even if you need to fake it to make it. That's part of this energy. Aries does not have all the answers. Aries just says, okay, I'm gonna walk the talk. I'm not quite sure how to walk. I'm not quite sure how to talk, but I'm gonna walk the talk. And there will be some stumbling. There will be some feathers ruffled in relationships, like I guarantee, because this is brave action. This is brave desire for reintegrating of the self. We are all being asked to do this work, so please be compassionate with your fellow human beings at this time, because everyone's doing it. All right. You know me, I love to talk, but we are going to transition this conversation and open it up and invite Jacob in. I'm so excited to be interviewing Jacob Tobia. I'm going to introduce them in a second, so I won't do the intro now, but they are a very talented person who is working on definitely healing masculinity throughout the world. So we're going to dive into that and yeah, enjoy. All right, we are here on the World of Rex with Jacob Tobia. How
Hi,
you doing? Hey.
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here on the World of Rex. I expect we'll be talking about dinosaurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
T-Rex.
Yeah,
In
what's your
fact,
favorite kind of Rex?
that's what I do every week. Did you not know? This is a dinosaur podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, dinosaurs. So we're
keeping it,
talking paleontology.
yeah, paleontology, keeping it prehistoric. Yes.
Hmm.
I am so excited to have you here with me. I just spoke that the listeners just listened to a whole diatribe on Chiron, which is the wound, Aries, masculinity. We're going to be talking about masculinity, the wound of masculinity. You're doing a lot of work in this
Hmm.
spaces. And so I thought, let's have you on the pod to talk about this since you're being
Yeah.
very brave in your journey here in general. I would love to start by, diving a little bit into your history, your past in regards to where you come from and how you've navigated gender. I
Yeah.
think starting with Sissy, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because that feels like the last well, I mean my whole life, but certainly the last like 15, 20 years of it, a big theme of it has been trying to figure out how do I escape masculinity and manhood, right? How do I distance myself and free myself from this institution, that has really hurt me?
Yeah.
Um, how do I find freedom from something that I was forced to inhabit that I didn't want? Um, and and I was so focused on getting away from men and getting away from being understood as a man, I didn't really like look back at all, because
Mm,
like when you're fleeing something, which this is like sort of this is kind of newer identity discourse for me, but it's really kind of how I'm beginning to think about what I understand non-binary and trans experience to be, especially on the trans feminine side. Like it is really, for most of us, anywhere on the trans femme spectrum, it is a it is a flight from the institution of manhood. We are escaping, right?
mm,
And we are
hmm
running, and we are trying to flee the violence of people who are trying to pull us back in,
mm,
because they try to punish you when you leave, right? If they catch you trying to escape, like you're done for.
yep,
And sometimes that's done for in an abstract way, and sometimes that's done for literally,
yeah.
right? Like men kill trans women because they consider them defectors from the army of men. Like, and how dare you defect from your service? How dare you defect from our military, right? You cannot flee this, because the moment you flee this, we all have to look around and doubt our service too. It's
Wow.
very deep, right? So I've been on this, like I think it took me a while to understand that that's in fact what I did. I spent my whole life fleeing, 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 trying to escape, plotting an escape, making an attempt, getting caught, having to sneak back in, having to pretend I was never trying to escape, right?
Yep.
Getting caught like on the periphery and being like, oh no, 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 I just got lost. I was just confused. Sorry, no, 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 no. Like I wasn't trying to get out. Don't know. I definitely wasn't trying to get out. I love being here. This is a fun place to be for me and for everyone. And we're having fun and you're having fun. I'm having
Yeah.
fun. This is
Yeah.
great. Like I made so many different attempts, and I tried to figure out what resources I need in order to safely get away, like where I was going to flee to, both metaphorically and literally,
Yes.
right? Like and what it would mean to try to do so safely. Um, and and I didn't bother to look back because I was so focused on escape. You can't like when you're trying to escape, you know, an abusive institution, generally you don't have time or capacity to think about what the people you were in that institution with were going through
You don't
and
have
are
time to
continuing to.
you don't have time to think about masculinity and men. Yeah,
Yeah.
like at
And like
all.
I hesitate to use a prison metaphor because I don't want to trivialize the experience of incarceration, but also
Mhm.
as an abolitionist, I love using prison metaphors because prisons are evil and vile
Yeah.
and should not exist.
Yes.
So with that in mind, knowing this comes from an abolitionist place, not from a trivializing place, like when you're trying to escape prison, you cannot think about everyone who's still inside.
Yes.
You
Wow.
just have to get the fuck out.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Wow.
And but now I've reached a place of something like safety and existential security. And part of it was because I wrote my escape, plan. I wrote a whole book about how I
A
escaped, right?
memoir.
I
Yeah.
publicly declared my escape, and it felt real enough that they aren't going to be able, like, because even after I escaped manhood, even after I was like, I'm non-binary, I use they, them, blah, 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 blah. Like, I kept looking over my shoulder, like, they're going to make me go back. This is going to fall
Oh
in on itself.
my
They're gonna
God.
come get me. They're still gonna come fucking get me, right? Like,
Yes.
like they are gonna find me and they're gonna drag me back. I
Yeah.
did I get to escape? Am I actually in a country? Did I make it to a country where they without an extradition clause,
Right. Right.
right?
Yes.
And like, is this extradition clause like, is the fact that they don't extradite real, or is it like not going to be real in my case? So is that kind of insecurity
Wow.
existentially, like
Yeah.
because that's how deep fleeing masculinity and manhood as institutions can be.
Yes.
Um, but I finally kind of taken this point to be like, okay, I am secure where I am. I am secure in who I am. And now I have this profound, now that I feel secure over the last few years, this profound like survivor's guilt has been washing over me. Like I got
Fascinating.
out and all these other people are still trapped.
Yes.
Half of the world in some case in a lot of cases are still trapped, and they're still struggling, they're still being forced to serve, and they're still under the delusion that serving is helping them,
Yeah.
that it's
This
going to be
is
good for them eventually.
this is so fascinating because just to bring it back to the astrology, and I know that
Of
that's not
course.
not your
I don't know shit
wheelhouse.
about it, but I love that you do.
I know, and I love that you support me loving astrology. Um,
It's some nerdy weird shit.
it's some nerdy weird
I
shit.
like nerdy weird shit.
Yes, and the weird thing about what you're tapping into, Jacob, not knowing the astrology at all, but tapping into it nonetheless, Aries rules the military. And so Chiron is in Aries and the wound is being brought up. And so to use a military metaphor, even a prison metaphor, but particularly military and service is part of the wound that's being highlighted right now
Yeah.
in terms of feeling like you have to fall in line. All these terms of like fall in line, boot camp, having to like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like all these very hardcore
Right.
masculine terms, that's coming in really big right now. People are looking at that, and you're writing your second book in this vein, or
Mm,
to come back and look at like, oh my God, look at who's still trapped, right? Look at
yeah.
who's still in
Yeah.
service. Yes.
Yeah. And it like, yeah, it's funny that like lines up in this way, that like that's cool and weird.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really is kind of, it feels, I've just gotten to this place where I, as a survivor of this institution, as someone who fled as a defector of from manhood, and I say manhood specifically because manhood to me is the institutional part of it, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't want to think, because like being a man and serving manhood are different things, in my
Mm.
opinion.
Yep.
Like
I hear
they're
it.
different gradations, right?
Yes.
Like serving, are you being a man does not inherently mean that you are proactively serving patriarchal institutions and spending great effort to maintain them, right? Like there's shades of gray in all of
Yeah.
this. There's huge gradations of the levels of violence that one does, even when one hasn't fled an institution officially, right?
Yeah.
There are more and less violent roles within a violent institution,
Yes.
frankly. Um, but yeah, like it, it's like the more my survivor's guilt kind of sets in, the more I realize like, oh fuck, these people need me. Like they really need me. And it's really rocked my world because I have been, and this is like the part of the introduction of my next book. And which, like, the title I can't even announce yet because it's not final. So you can't know, like it's a book about men and masculinity, and that's what I can tell
Mystery
you.
baby. Yes.
Right. But
Can't.
like the
Yes.
title, we're still working on it, and
Yes.
it's still landing and settling and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Um, but like, and I can't even tell you when it's gonna come out yet. I think I know, but I can't say yet because it just has to actually be official and announced and whatever.
I will
Um,
announce it when it is announceable.
how
Yes.
coquettish am I being?
I love it
I'm so
so much.
coquettish. Anyway,
Get it, girl.
but I'm a little French coquette. Coquette. But yeah, the like, the so much of the introduction, like, because I needed to write for myself why I'm writing this, like why I needed to give an origin story for myself first and foremost, that then is one for my readers. And like I had this moment relatively recently where I was speaking at Santa Monica College, and I did like a keynote, and then after the keynote I did a workshop that was like, it was with it was a class like on queer memoir. And the workshop was super simple. I just like read a moment of gender joy from my memoir. I read a moment of gender challenge, and then I invited all the students to think about moments of gender joy and challenge in their own lives. And and then share with their group and report back and all that. And
Can you share with
yeah,
listeners really briefly what gender joy is and gender challenge is?
yeah. So like, I shared a story about like for me, moments of gender joy are moments where, I mean, it's really simple. It's a moment where gender feels like a source of joy to you.
Yeah.
right? Or where the lack of any sense of gender feels like a sense of joy to you, right?
Okay.
Like it's a moment where either gender is facilitating your joy or gender is not standing in the way of your joy.
Mm,
And it can be either. It can be either
yeah.
or, both and. Like it's, it lives in complex ways. And then moments of gender challenge are moments when gender is interfering with your ability to experience joy or doing violence to you,
Yeah.
spiritual, physical, what have you. Um, and so I shared like two different stories of moments of that. I'm trying to remember which ones I shared specifically in that workshop. One was about fagging out at church when I was a child, and how it was really funny that my church became like my safe place because like school, I couldn't just like be a big homo anymore without getting bullied. But at church, like I could get away with it because anytime I was like, if I was like doing a dance thing at church, it was a dance thing for Jesus. So I wasn't being a homo, right? Like I could do arts and crafts because they were for Christ, okay? Like I'm not a faggot, right? Like
Jesus was your homo facilitator.
yeah, like I could sing in choir at church and no one would make fun of me because you're not allowed to make fun of someone who's participating in a worship service because then you're going to get your ass handed to you because like Jacob is praising the Lord and giving service unto the Lord and glory unto him. How dare you tell Jacob that that's girly?
Yeah.
Like it was sort of this weird like it was this weird like loophole, that like
I
people have
love
been
this so much.
homos have been using for ever, right? Like
Ever. Yes.
since literally Michelangelo, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to be a faggy little painter, well you better be painting pictures of Jesus. And you can paint all the abs you want as long as they are Christ's abs
Hmm.
or the
Yes.
Pope.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so like, I was using the classic loophole that Homo's been using for millennia
Millennia.
of like just do something for Christ and it's not homo anymore. But I shared that because I wanted to like really show that moments of gender joy can be unexpected, right? They don't have
Mm.
to just be the tropes that we're taught about like I put on my first pair of high heels and felt empowered, right? Like which that one doesn't age well because then you have to get a podiatrist and you're like this how is this ever empowerment? Um, and then like, the moments of gender challenge, I talked about like the moment when my brother and his friends hung my Barbie in effigy, right? Like
Mm.
when I was a kid, because they found her and I tried to keep her secret. And then like I came back and she was like had all her hair cut off and was dangling by floss from the banister. And it was obviously it wasn't hanging my Barbie, it was hanging my femininity in effigy,
Yes.
right? Like it was
Wow.
literally killing a part of me, in a symbolic gesture, like
Yeah.
we're in some weird medieval town.
Yeah.
Um, and and what really struck me as I was sharing is like everyone in the class was engaged. Everyone, except for there were these two boys, young men, whatever you want to call them, in the back who like just sat there and did nothing and were completely blank the entire time.
Yeah. Like
And
completely dissociated for sure.
yeah, absolutely
Yes.
dissociated,
Yes.
entirely dissociated.
Yes.
And I just kept looking at them like,
They
I
need
need to
so much
learn
help.
something from this.
They
Yeah,
need so much help. Yeah.
because I'm like, we have an identity politics right now that says that men have everything and the rest of us have nothing.
Yes.
That men are okay and doing great and patriarchy is working for them. And that patriarchy helps them and makes them strong and powerful and rich and fed, right? And that the rest of us are impoverished by patriarchy and ruined by it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, on a material basis, sure, for sure. When it
Yeah.
comes to
Capital.
capital and
Capital.
food and shit, absolutely, right? When it comes to bodily autonomy, safety, it gets a little more complicated, right? Like
Yep.
because also we have to think about like class analysis and race and a lot of other
Yep.
intersectional identities, right? Like that's a separate chapter in my forthcoming book that I don't even get into because it's too feisty to share on this podcast.
Got it. Yes, girl.
I got to
Yeah.
leave that one for like a you buy the book if you want to read that shit.
Uh-huh. Buy
Um,
the book.
yeah, but like, but in general, it's like what I realized in that moment, and it became undeniable for me. It became undeniable in a way that like I'm scared to speak it in public, but I know it to be true, which is that spiritually speaking, right now, like men and boys are doing the worst of any of us
100%. I know this
when
as
it
a
comes to
trans man.
gender.
I know
Yeah,
this as a trans man because I'm so close to it. I have two brothers. You have a
yeah,
brother. Like
hmm
we grew up with it. We live with it. We have fathers. Like we grew up. It's almost
yeah,
uncouth. And this is the thing, what you're speaking to. It's almost uncouth to even like relay any sympathy towards
right.
men. And you're not even being sympathetic so much as empathetic and sensitive to
And
a
real and
real,
literally
re
honest.
honest, to a crisis, to a
Right.
crisis.
An
Yeah.
absolute crisis, a complete crisis, a total crisis that like that like feminist discourse has not figured out how to address yet.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and watching men try to address it for themselves, like, oh my God, these poor things. And
They
it's
don't
why they're
have
all
the
turning into fascists.
Yeah, they don't have the tools. And I know
Right,
that because I have had to develop the tools as a, I'm going to say this, which is weird, but like a non-man man. Like I'm like man adjacent. I'm like consider myself man adjacent, which is fine. Like,
right,
however, I'm not saying that trans men are, but I feel man adjacent in some ways. And as someone who's not directly, I was not in the, what is it, the boot camp, the service, the institution that you were
right.
institutionalized in.
You were in another
I
institution.
was in another institution, but since I am now adjacent to their experience, I'm recognizing as someone who wasn't even institutionalized in their institution, how dangerous it is to be like testosterone dominant and identifying as male and not having any spiritual infrastructure and then trying to find any level of accountability for
Yeah,
anything. It's almost
yeah,
impossible.
yeah. It's really, really tough. And, and so I've just gotten to this place where I'm like, it is my responsibility. And I'm kind of pissed that no one else has done it because I'm like, can someone just do this? I want to have fun. Like girls just want to have fun. I just want
Girls,
like I'm like, can someone else abolish capitalism in prisons and also their bullshit so that I can just like chill and like have fun and be a little art bitch and like not worry about stuff.
babe, but
Um,
your Wikipedia first thing is LGBTQ activist.
Shut up
I
and
know
don't
you're an activist.
shut up. Shut the fuck up. You keep that out of your mouth. Um, I am an LGBTQ plus carefree lady who can't
Carefree
be
lady.
bothered with anything.
She's
Um,
busy.
but no, it's like okay, well, someone's got to step up and do this, and
Yes.
I kept waiting, and I think I didn't know that I was waiting for someone else to write this book, and I was like, all right, fuck it, I'm going in.
Yep.
And also like, okay, I actually need to claim that the people who need me the most in the world right now are men and boys.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the only like that like not that like people of my experience, people who have defected from manhood and masculinity are some of the only people who can really reach them because we've been there, because we know the rules, we know the institution, we survived within it for decades,
Yep.
and we have a unique ability to help explain the joy of escape and to name like, oh, that thing that you do, here's how it hurts you. Oh,
Yeah.
the promises that this person's making to you never going to come true,
Yeah.
right? Like there's this and I have this authority that I'm learning to claim around like I am like people like me, like non-binary people, trans women, like in this really fucked up but like glorious way, we are the most expert people on masculinity and manhood in the world.
I experienced that because I'm partnered with one, and I'm like, she knows
Yeah,
way more about men than I may ever know. Like, it's such a deep
right.
level of intimacy. It's such a
Like
deep
and
level.
yeah,
Yeah.
like trans femme people who have abandoned manhood and left it behind and fought to escape from it know more about manhood than any people on the planet. We
Yeah.
should be looked to as the experts. It's why like two-spirit people and gender diverse people in so many indigenous cultures around the world were considered and understood to be spiritually wise and
Yep.
healers. It's
Yes.
because we do know more in
Yes.
certain ways. We have objectivity and lived experience in a way that no one else has.
Yeah.
And and so I'm really learning to like claim that expertise and even to claim that expertise above cis men. I know more about your masculinity than you do, way more.
You
You
have,
aren't
of course
honest
you
with
do.
yourself.
Of
You have
course
not
you do.
escaped. You are still
Yes.
living in the fucking matrix. You are still, is it red pilled or blue pilled? That's the one that
I
makes you
never remember,
smart.
but I'm pretty sure it's blue pilled. I'm pretty sure blue pilled is like, I'm
Whatever, you're
asleep.
pilled, blah,
You're
blah, blah. You
asleep.
haven't
You're
escaped your
asleep.
own
Yeah.
matrix. Like you haven't escaped whatever matrix you're in, right? Like you haven't seen the other side of this.
Yeah.
I know more about what you're going through than you do right now.
Yes.
And not like as an actual individual human fucking experience,
Yeah.
but on a structural level. And
Yes.
no, these cis men who are trying to lead this conversation are incapable. And if they were capable, they would have been fixing more by now. Because
Yeah.
frankly, their interventions and their attempts at intervening are pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
And
seeing that. Yeah. We're
yeah,
seeing that
and
on a
I'm
global
like,
scale.
okay, I'm gonna step in here because the people you are looking to as your experts, like when I had to do it and analyze even like the field of experts who are engaging in this work,
Yeah.
like it's sad.
Yeah.
Like there's like maybe two people who are even doing a sort of okay job.
You mean in terms of like the educational system in the world or the US in terms of
Yeah, like
looking
the
at
men who have
masculinity
been
studies?
positioned as
Yeah.
yeah, the men who've been positioned as experts on alternative or like transformative masculinities. I'm just like, you ain't doing enough, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, there's
or
not even
you're
enough. There's not even
yeah,
enough. Yeah.
or you're
Yeah.
coming from a subject position where like there's no people aren't going to like relate to you or understand like you in and of yourself are not enough. We need a chorus of people here, right?
Yeah.
Like we need a multiplicity of voices
Yeah.
and signature among those voices, like an entire section of that choir must be trans femme people
Yes. Yes.
being like, we got out and we know more.
Yeah.
Like we should be conducting it probably. Um,
Love this.
so, it's this really weird turn for me that I didn't even expect, but I also love when that happens in life and like you just gotta fucking go with it because those boys ripped me to shit.
Yeah.
Like watching them dissociate, like I was like, oh my God, they are writhing. They are
Yeah.
writhing. They're absolutely writhing right now. And I know that because I have a dissociative tendency when
Sure.
it comes to like certain triggers, and everyone sees it happen to me, and it's like really sad when it happens.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's all around like fame and prestige and my dreams being dead. And so like, when I
T.
like have to sit through an award show or something, like you will just watch me shut down completely as a human being and be unable to speak.
Yeah.
And it's like because the pain is so deep and
Yeah. Yeah.
and also because for me, what really comes up, I think, in those spaces is I'm like my brain, my dysmorphia really kicks in, and like my
Hmm.
dysmorphia slash dysphoria, it's the same thing for me.
Yeah.
Like they really kicks in, and like I'm at some fancy Hollywood things watching someone else be celebrated, and all my brain says is, yeah, you obviously can't be celebrated because you're ugly.
Yeah.
And you're too ugly to ever be celebrated, and no one's ever going to celebrate you because you're ugly. You're so not beautiful. You're not one of the beautiful people. You can't get an award, right? And then like, and but it's, so what I'm saying is that when I watch people dissociate, I know how deep what's going on is for
Well,
them.
and what I hear you saying actually about those two boys in the room, and I have similar experiences in my life with my
Yeah,
stand-up comedy when men are in the crowd and cis straight men are in the crowd and I'm at a cis straight show where
right.
I disclose that I'm trans. When I disclose that I'm trans as like part of my joke setup, there's always at least 2 to 4 men who completely dissociate
Yeah,
immediately. Like they were
yeah,
laughing, Jacob, they were laughing up
yeah,
until that joke, and then they do not laugh the rest of the show, and they
yeah,
stare at either the floor or me,
yeah,
but they don't make any facial expressions. They're completely like outside of their body.
yeah,
What I hear you saying, and I think is what's going on, is they're witnessing you or they're witnessing me on stage, and they're like, I can never actually fully be myself, so fuck you. Like they can't handle the fact that
yeah,
they're like, well, I can't have what you have, which is for
yeah,
you gender joy, me gender joy, but also us, you and I both have a certain level of freedom that is hard fought, hard won,
right,
that they're like, no, I have to be part of this club. And so I can't actually have the thing that you have, which is freedom. I can't actually be my full self.
right. Like they like, and I don't think this is an overstatement. When they see the kind of freedom that we have, it brings up like they are confronting the absolute heart of the abuse that they've endured.
Yes. I don't
And
think that's
like
an overstatement.
and it's a surprise to them. They feel ambushed. They weren't ready for that. They thought they were just going to a comedy show. They thought they were just going to be walking down a sidewalk,
Yeah.
right? And then all of a sudden you come out and you're like, "Oh yeah," and as a trans guy, and they go, "What?" And all of
Yeah.
a sudden they're like, "Yeah, my father beat me." Right? And I've never told anyone.
Yeah.
And I was told that made me stronger. Or
Yeah.
I twirl around the corner in a dress and and like while they're just walking to the grocery store and they have to think about, oh God, I beat up a faggot at my high school
Yeah. Or at 5 years old, a lot of them wore nail polish and got
and
beat
I
up
got
for
beat
it.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. But
Both
also, I'm
and
like,
most of the time.
I know a lot of cis straight men today who wore nail polish as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and then they stopped because it was not safe. So parts of
Right.
what's happening is parts of their own expressivity
Yeah.
have to be compartmentalized and killed. And so
Yeah.
they're walking around with all these dead corpses inside of themselves.
Yeah. And like and we are the ghost
Yes. Oh,
showing up,
for sure.
reminding them of everything that's dead inside of them. And they don't yet understand. And this is what I'm trying to fucking fix, right? They don't understand that we are their allies in healing
Yes.
that. They haven't gotten there yet because our internet discourse has grown so acerbic where all everyone thinks it's cool to do. If you want to sound edgy and get a bunch of retweets, you just say men are trash. And like everyone's like, ha ha ha, lol, yeah, men are so trash. Blah, blah. And like everyone acts like that's radical to say or fucking important to say.
Yes.
And so those men see people like us, and they've been told by both the right wing bullshit that they're consuming, but also have seen that comes from somebody. They have seen from us directly, from people
Yes.
like us, from me
Yes.
in the past, frankly. They have
Yes.
seen us directly say, fuck you. My
Yes.
existence is a fuck you to you. And I'm
Yes.
like, no, babe, my existence is the only way you are going to heal and find joy in this world. And I am going to fight tooth and nail to help you find that joy. That is literally what I am doing right now in this stupid little lipstick that keeps coming off on my muffin.
Yes. Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and Yeah, and so it's been this real amazing moment for me to like step into that power and also to step into like that radical compassion that is completely antithetical to dominant feminist discourse right now.
Yes.
And to step in because half of the book is a course correction. Half of the book is addressed toward the feminist movement saying, y'all done fucked up. We done fucked up. We
Yep.
fucked up.
Yep.
Big, 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 big time.
Big time.
And we should be ashamed of ourselves. We
Yeah.
we knew better and we still fucked up.
Yeah.
Our trauma informed it, but still, that's not an excuse. And our trauma is not an excuse for us to traumatize people any more than men's trauma is an excuse for them to traumatize people.
Yes.
Yes, hurt people, but it ain't an excuse.
Yes. And what I hear you also saying, just from almost a kinesthetic point of view, like a dance move, is like
Yeah,
instead of having an oppositional, there's so much oppositional a nature, an oppositional
yeah,
nature in feminist discourse right now of like we are against men, right?
right.
Like men are trash, they are over here, and they are opposite from us, and they're trash. We need them over there. And what I hear you saying on a movement base, and I feel this as well as a trans man, is like I am also stepping next to them like in a line dance. And
Yeah,
I'm with y'all. Like I'm with y'all. You know why? Because if we're opposing you, none of us are getting fixed. None
right,
of us are healing. Like nothing's gonna happen. Like so much violence
right.
is gonna still continue to happen if we're considering them as an oppositional force.
And also, like the moment they can affirm your trans masculinity, they can affirm something inside of themselves that they didn't even know they needed to hold.
Mic drop.
Yeah,
Beautiful. Same with
you
you.
know.
Same thing. You know, they can also heal that part of themselves that did wear lipstick or did wear nail polish when they were 5. And I want to
Yeah, and
be
then they can
really
put some on again and look really cute.
exactly. And like we
I'm just
can
trying to make a fashion revolution. Biatch.
yeah. And if they want to wear lipstick, great. If they don't, that's fine. But it's like, what would humans look like if we didn't feel so imprisoned by these codes?
Yeah,
What would we look like? I think we would all look a lot more like freaky and fun and weird and
right.
awesome.
And yeah, it's also just like the thing I find so frustrating is that our current like I mean, and this is like when I have to tell people about like what this book is about, and like when I have to give my elevator pitch at parties, which literally is every single day of my life now for the next 20 years. Like, why did I do this to myself? But I did. I made this choice and I am being sort of compensated fairly for it. The literary market is not so hot right now. And
Yep.
but maybe if it sells like gangbusters, I don't know, get a house or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is neither here nor there. But what I say about it is I'm like, yeah, the book fundamentally asks the question, what happens if we stop seeing men as categorical beneficiaries of patriarchal institutions and start understanding men for what they are, which is co-survivors of those same patriarchal institutions.
Boom.
If we
Thank you.
shift that lens, everything changes and we
Yes.
will literally be able to save the world.
Yes.
Like, and if we don't shift that lens, we will never, our planet will burn. It
Jacob.
is burning because we refuse to acknowledge men as co-survivors.
Yes. Jacob, I need this book. I'm like, I can't.
Yeah,
And I know
it
that I need this book on, I mean, like a phenomenological, like spiritual level. I need this book because as a trans masculine person going towards what, current feminist discourse is saying is like the enemy, moving towards the
right,
enemy, being, in so many spaces, people are like, shut up, you're a white man, who
right.
even know I'm trans. I've had to curtail so much. The moment I started passing as a man, I was like, oh my God, I have to shut my energy down to not take up too much space, to not do anything that's going to be considered male, right? You start to like really limit yourself. So it's like you were escaping from the institution. I was headed towards it, but then when I started getting towards it, I was like, oh, this is a prison, and all these men are imprisoned. And I, from the other side, the people who are from, the other
Right.
institutions, they're looking at me like, don't misbehave, right? So it's just all a trap. I need this book because I need other
Yeah.
people to realize, oh, you know, maybe we can all work together here and
Right.
heal some
And
stuff.
actually, we have no other option.
Yeah.
Like the thing that's really obnoxious about human beings is that like they're worthy of dignity.
Everybody.
So fucking obnoxious.
Yeah. Every single one of us,
Yeah. And like
regardless.
the thing that's obnoxious about like having a feminist movement is that you have to have compassion.
So much work. It's so
So
much
much,
work
so
to be
annoying.
radically
God,
compassionate.
God, it's so annoying.
My question for you, we're near the end of our lovely conversation. This is
Yeah.
so good. I could talk to you forever.
Wait, can I give one caveat around the compassion part?
Oh, please, yes.
Oh, so I'm not saying you have to. We don't all, we are not all required to give radical compassion instantly,
Yes. Well, that was my
right? Like
question.
if
This
you
was
are
my
healing
segue.
from trauma, take your fucking time to get there, but it needs to be the goal
Yeah.
for your own freedom and your own emancipation as a human being, right? Like, because even as a survivor of trauma, the only way that you find real healing for your fucking self, the only way you find real freedom for yourself is when you can understand the brokenness of the person who hurt you
Yes.
and
Yes.
care for them. That
Yes.
is what freedom looks like. And
Yes.
it's awful. And then it's beautiful.
And then it's beautiful.
Then it's
You're
beautiful.
right. The process is really gnarly. Yes.
It's so fucking gnarly. Oh my God. And like when I was writing about it in this book, I was just like, Jesus, fuck, you're fucked up.
Yeah.
But
That was
also
my
like, it's good.
we're on a brainwave. I love you. We're on a brain. It's so cute.
Hey,
We're
like,
on a
yeah, you're like, yeah.
we're on a brainwave because my question for you, and it's very related to the astrology, so that's why I'm kind
Yeah.
of pulling it back here. My question for you is, what was your healing journey like? And I know that's a very broad question, but I would say more so leading up to the book, because people can read
Yeah.
Sissy, and I really recommend all my listeners, please read Sissy, because that gives your whole journey of,
Yeah.
for a minute. But now, recently leading up to the book, what were some like cracks and fissures and explorations that you had where you're like, oh, I can do deeper healing work and I feel strong enough now to share everything you're sharing here on the pod.
Yeah. Um, I mean, part of it is just some reckless abandon, which comes from an exhaustion, right? Like I'm really exhausted of I'm exhausted by what we label feminist discourse these days. I'm exhausted. I'm so fucking tired, right? Like and a certain and also like there's just a certain that's like the more decades that you do once you're counting your activist career in decades, like you're like the sleepiness and the exhaustion of it sets in pretty bone deep. And it's nice because you become this curmudgeonly activist grandma who just says what the fuck you think, you know?
The wisdom
And
of the
so,
elder. Yeah.
yeah, like, and also just the fucking, like, the no fucks given of elders.
Hmm.
That's my
Hmm.
favorite thing. Like,
Hmm.
I love old people because the older you get, the more people are just like, here's what it fucking is, you know? Like in the WGA strikes, these old union guys, like, they give the best fucking speeches because they just don't give a fuck anymore, you know? Like, I mean, they give many fucks, but they don't give a
Yeah.
fuck about censoring themselves,
Yes.
about not anyway. So like part of it is just that, right?
Yeah.
And it's been embracing that that's beautiful and that the erosion of my self-censorship is is a gift to the world, right?
That's
And it's
beautiful.
also about not being afraid anymore. Like it's about naming that cancel culture itself is a failure of a project
Yes.
and that I'm no longer afraid of upsetting other people who consider themselves to be feminists
Yes. Same.
and who are feminists, right? Like I am okay fighting with other feminists, and I would like to because we have to disagree on some fundamental things for a minute,
Yes.
and we have to have more authentic conversations, and we have to get realer with one another
Yes.
as sisters in a movement, you know.
Yes.
Um, and then also a lot of it just came through like my own like I mean my own Buddhist practice, right? Like I
Mm.
started practicing in the Plum Village tradition, which is like a sort of a strain of Vietnamese Buddhism, kind of like led by Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's been beautiful and this like gorgeous practice experience for me. And there was something about like I practiced at at the men's side of the monastery, which granted it is co-ed in in certain ways. Like there were also women practicing with us, but like you know the nuns in my practice are still in their kind of like second wave 70s feminist moment, which
Sure.
is
Yes.
fabulous and really
Yes.
radical for like organized Buddhist practice. Like it's really cool that they but like you know me trying to figure out how to enter into that space and practice with the nuns is still kind of a scary thing. Scary isn't the right word. It's just a process. It's just a
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
that needs to happen.
Negotiating. Yeah.
And I'm just starting out in this practice. So I was like, I ain't trying to rock the entire goddamn boat my first trip.
Sure.
But so I spent the week practicing with the monks. And there were some women practicing with us, and there were some non-binary people practicing with us. And honestly, the real reason I practiced with the fucking monks is because sometimes you are so gay that you end up following your lesbian friends back to the men. Literally. I was
I
just like,
love
I want
it.
to practice with my friends. My cool lesbian friends and my cool trans masculine non-binary friends are practicing with the monks, and I want to hang out with them. So here we are. Um,
Amazing.
but it was really beautiful. Like I saw something different and felt a different texture of of people who had also in their own way, and they don't even have the language for it necessarily, had really like left behind attachments to manhood and masculinity, but in a way that wasn't understood by them as queer, but was deeply understood by me as queer. And that healing work, I think, has made me bolder.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I feel emboldened by the Buddhist tradition I'm now a part of to just, and also by honestly the Christian tradition I was raised in, but like the badass lefty part of it, right? Like
Yes.
the part of like the people who actually read the Bible, like
Yes.
actually read the fucking document.
Yeah.
Like to just be like, okay, it's time for some radical honesty, in the tradition of the people who are my spiritual leaders and spiritual role models, because
Yeah.
most people were mad at them all the time, constantly.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm very vocal about being Jewish, but even then on the podcast, you'll hear me say the phrase Christ consciousness a lot. I use
Yeah.
that phrase a lot because I just read this book about, Jesus potentially being a trans man, fiction. It's a sci-fi fiction. It's amazing.
Love
It's called,
it.
it's called
I have
Him.
I have a theory
So
about that
it's
too.
so good, right? But in the book, I'm reading about this like trans version of Jesus, and you read the book and you're like, oh my God, this person was loving everybody. This person was
Yeah,
trying to include everybody. And I know that, a lot of my listeners might be like, oh, Christianity, feelings about it. But still, what you're talking to is the underlying tenets of Christianity and Buddhism, which are really
right.
similar.
Yeah,
Radical compassion, of course, through healing. I love that you made the caveat of like, you have to heal big triggers and big traumas to get to
yeah.
a place to not force you're not forcing radical compassion. You're landing there after doing a lot of deep healing, which is 100% this Chiron and Aries. It's exactly what this transit is.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, like I think it's delusional perhaps, but also I think it's kind of cunty and fun. But I'm like, well, I'm turning 33 this year, and then I'll publish this book, and then
Your
it's time
Jesus
for
year.
probably being crucified.
Yes.
Let's
Oh, I can't.
go.
I will be up there with you. Like I'm
Yeah.
ready to go. I don't care. After October, I'm like, don't care. Do not care. Moving forward. Let's go. Yeah.
Hmm.
Is there any final thing you want to share with the listeners before we log off?
Um, Lord, well, I don't want to open up the talking more about Jesus thing, but I am going to share one little passage from Sissy, because you just since we're talking about it, since you're talking about
Please.
trans theories of Christ, I just have a little part in like it's in the like note to self. Like I have like a letter to myself at the end of my book. It's the little epilogue. Um, which is interesting because in this book, the epilogue is note to self. It's me writing to myself. And then my next book, the epilogue is me writing to men,
Wow.
which I
Oh,
think
Jacob.
it, well, if assuming my editor keeps it.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
like, but I think it's like that represents the shift, right?
Ooh, so
But
beautiful.
so in this, I'm like, I have like, I say, you know that Jesus was dope as fuck, because I talk a lot about my theological journey through my
Yeah.
gender in
Yeah.
the book. Um, you know that Jesus was dope as fuck. Jesus was a radical hippie who hung out with a band of working class weirdos, hated the Roman Empire and corrupt religious leaders alike, embraced
Yes.
sex workers and saw their humanity, and wore flowy, fabulous robes perfectly accessorized with strappy leather sandals. You also know that Jesus was non-binary. It's kind of obvious to you, actually, at this point. God is clearly too big, too wise, too omnipotent to have an easily discernible binary human gender. I mean, God made all the genders, so clearly God isn't just one. God is genderless, or rather, genderful. And according to Christian theology, Jesus is the child of God, God's spirit manifested in a human body that just happened to be male. So Jesus was a genderless divine soul living inside a male body, which means that Jesus was non-binary and a member of the trans community. The way I see it, either you believe Jesus is the child of an omnipotent, genderless God and was therefore trans, or you're denying the full divinity of Jesus Christ. Boom, take that, haters. Which is really just my way of being like, I mean, because I don't really like that theological tenet is one that I'm like, that doesn't feel important to me. Like the whole
Yeah.
like child of God thing. I'm like, okay, in an abstract way, we are all children of God.
Sure.
Yeah. Like in this specific way, I'm like, I think everyone really misconstrued what Christ was saying in that. Like the 2000 year long game of telephone can really fuck some shit up.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
but yeah, I just had fun with that little passage where I was like, so do you think God is small?
Yeah. Or really
Or do you
big.
think that Jesus isn't the Son of God? You can figure that out. Figure
Yeah.
that out for yourself. If you're like more like if you're a proper Christian. And if you
Just
aren't a proper Christian, you don't have to care about it
yeah. Love
at
that.
all.
Freedom. Beautiful.
So anyway,
That was a wonderful way to end this episode. So
and if you
good.
want more of my grating homosexual voice, feel free to pick up Sissy, and you can either read and imagine the tone, or you can listen to the audiobook and hear 12 hours of me just nonstop, but in like soothing literary faggot tones.
Love that.
That's what they
I-
make you do when you do audiobook. You can't just be like,
yeah.
and then I did blah blah blah. No, it's you have to you have to read here, and it has to be a little bit slower, but still authentic to who you are, like that.
You are a professional, Jacob.
The
That was
timbre.
yeah, you got that timbre down.
Got that timbre.
Oh, yeah. So, how can folks stay in touch with what you're doing and follow you with all our tenuous relationships to Instagram and
Oh
things?
yeah, no, you can definitely follow me on the internet, and one day I will emerge from hibernation. So if you want to be first on that list, to go ahead and follow me on the gram and the internets and whatever. Got a website. You can email if you want to book me for a speaking thing, and also just in general, just be on the lookout because this book gonna be announced soon enough, and I'm gonna be doing some stuff soon enough, and it hopefully gonna be cause quite a stir, but in the good way.
I'm excited. I'm here for you.
I appreciate
Yes.
you, and I'm here for you.
Love you so much.
Love
Thank
you
you.
too.
Thank you for being on the pod.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. All
Bye.
right. Bye.